I did want to ask you, but what do you think about the current status of the NFL? What do you think about the fact of things starting to ramp up again and a lot of the stuff surrounding Aaron Rodgers? You just heard the Kenny Mayne interview about him. What do you think about all that, all the new news coming out?
Oh man, I can't wait for the NFL to get going. I've got an 8-year-old son that plays flag football, so he watches YouTube videos all the time of football, and I was getting fired up. I just said to him last night, I'm like, I can't wait for the NFL. Uh, and it's actually funny you mentioned Aaron Rodgers because I don't say much on Twitter. You know, every once in a while I'll put like a pic out or whatever, but I saw someone was knocking this dude, because Aaron was in Hawaii, so
Yeah.
on vacation, and he had his shirt off, and some
Yeah.
dude was like knocking him because he didn't think he was in good enough shape. And so, I fired back and I'm like, first of all, bro, like quarterbacks aren't very yoked. That's not their thing.
Yeah.
You gotta
Yeah.
you gotta have it up here if you're a quarterback in the NFL. And
Facts.
so I kind of came to Aaron's defense, which is funny, but this whole thing that's going down with Green Bay, you might find it interesting that the Green Bay Packers for the last 10 years, they've used their first round draft pick to go on defense. Not one time in the last 10 years have they gone offense. And
Yeah.
so I think Aaron's been really patient over there. They didn't tell him about Jordan Love last year getting drafted, which
Yeah.
was kind of weak. You think they'd say, hey, we're going to go quarterback here, whatever. So I saw a stat because he's thrown for over 400 touchdowns, and
Mhm.
like only like 3 of those 400 touchdowns have actually gone to a first round draft choice.
Oh, wow.
So is that crazy?
Yeah, that's wild.
So, because you think about like Tom Brady had Randy Moss, for a little bit, and he's got some other, but so Aaron hasn't had very much help around him overall. So I could see how the guy's getting a little bit, like, come on, guys.
Yeah, frustration. I definitely see it too, and it's always tough. I always feel when a guy finally puts his foot in the sand and says, "Hey, I'm not happy. Like this isn't what I've wanted over the course of the last few years, especially for everything I've provided for this franchise." And sometimes I feel like it's disheartening when you see the fan blowback because it's almost as if you're supposed to just stomach it as a player. And a lot
Yeah.
of times we as normal people, we probably relate more to the players than we do even management because a lot of people, majority of people in corporate America are employees. So you would think that the modern fan, the common fan would be able to relate to a player when they're disgruntled, especially when it's not like we haven't seen evidence of management not doing right by the player or including that player in certain conversations in terms of drafting and stuff like that. Like imagine if we were working our job for years and we were one of the best employees there, like quality of being one of the best employees in the industry, whether
Right.
you're in tech or whatever the case might be. I'll even just simplify it. If you're the best cashier of any cashier, McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, and you've been employee of the month, I don't know how many times running, years on end, and literally McDonald's, the franchise that you work at is only relevant because you work there. People know your hours, they come to
Right.
see you. And then
Right.
you see a new guy get hired and you know that new guy is essentially being hired and they say, hey man, start training this guy. Let's get this guy, start showing him everything you've been around for a long time, your paycheck's starting to get a little up there, and let's start getting this new guy ingratiated with how things work. You're going to kind of sit there and be like, well, nobody told me that we were hiring this new guy. And
Right.
you're going to feel a certain type of way about it, especially when for years, like you said, they haven't been drafting guys in the first round for defense specifically, and or they have been drafting for defense specifically, and nothing really offensively. And we've seen it actually cost Aaron years at times when the offensive line wasn't good enough, and it was pretty much Aaron and Jordy Nelson out there just chugging it out. And then even I saw a report recently that Jordy Nelson essentially wanted to come back and play on the Packers, pretty much one of those end my career with the Packers type thing on a
Yeah.
low deal, and they didn't want to do it. And
Really.
yeah, and that's one of those things where I'm just like, well, that's Aaron's guy. That's been Aaron's guy for years. And you can't even do something as small as that. Then I can only imagine when he makes these comments on ESPN talking about it's more than just the it's more than just the game itself. It's the people that build the franchise, that build the culture. And I mean, even in that interview, he was thorough, saying that he was fine with the players, he was fine with the coaches, he has no issue with the fans. And it was so glaring that he left out
The
Brian
upper
Good.
management.
Yeah, he left out Brian Gutekunst and the president Mark Murphy. So that whole saga, I feel for him. I feel for him. I just think it's tough because he hasn't crossed that line yet where it's like I'm demanding a trade, and he hasn't crossed. He's still in that territory where it feels like, oh, we can work something out. It feels like that. Like, don't you get that sense too? Like it hasn't
Yeah.
gotten to that point yet.
Yeah. And he knows he's getting up there in age, and that's 2 years now that they've made it to the NFC championship game
Yeah,
and lost. So he knows they're only a couple pieces away. It's kind of the same thing in Seattle with Russell Wilson, who I love. Russell's great. He just wants to be involved in the conversation of what they're doing with personnel, and they've earned the right to do that. These
yeah.
teams would be nothing without those two. And I think they've handled themselves really well. I mean, they could just throw their hands up and say, "Hey, I'm out of here. See you, trade me." They don't do that. So
Yeah.
I definitely favor the players on those.
And it's interesting too because with Aaron's situation, I think when it comes to him, and I think most times we don't really see movement on these type of things until a deadline starts approaching, where something like a trade deadline is coming up or something of that sort that really forces action. Like we normally don't see deals that, like when you have a certain deadline to sign a guy to a long-term contract, all of a sudden the deal gets done like almost an hour before the deadline. So
Right.
yeah, with this kind of thing, I don't know if it will be something that, because the management of the Packers has been adamant that they're not going to trade Aaron, and he's just kind of been like, well, and right now we're in voluntary OTAs, but when it comes to training camp, I saw that it was going to be like a $93,000 fine for him
Yeah.
for each day he was missing. I'm just like, gosh, that's a lot of money,
Yeah, it is.
to be missing. But I mean, if you're Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers, I guess you can pay the bill.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. The favored team after Green Bay is supposed to be the Broncos. So
Mm,
um, that would be a team to contend with if he went, whatever team if he went to another team. I mean, they'd contend right away. Just like, I mean, Tampa had a lot of pieces in place
yeah.
already, but it's just like when Tom moves on, you don't find those guys,
You know,
very often.
that's the interesting thing because that's the main reason. I don't know if you feel like he's going to get traded, but I think that's the main reason I don't think they'll trade him unless he literally just says, "Hey, I'm gone." Like, "Hey,
Right.
I'm retiring." Unless he does something like that, or he's just like, "I'm on Jeopardy for the next whatever amount of time." I don't know, but I just don't see, because when you trade, I think the last quarterback of that caliber of talent, I mean, we don't have those kind of quarterbacks get moved that often. I think the last one of that talent was probably, I can't even. I mean, we just recently had Matthew Stafford get traded to the Rams. I don't even think he was of that caliber. The last guy might be Drew Brees, but it wasn't. Drew Brees wasn't Drew Brees yet when he
Yeah.
got
Right.
traded. So
Right.
it's so rare when it happens, and I just don't see him being, especially off of an MVP season.
Right.
Like imagine that you're trading the reigning MVP. Like
Yeah, they don't want to trade him for sure. I think it would come down to him going, "Guys, I'm not playing for you.
mm,
So you might want to start talking about trades because it's not happening. So you might as well get something for me." I
I
think
know.
they're like,
Yeah.
he's like, "I'm not doing it. So you want to trade? You better start talking to people about trades because I'm not playing here." I think that's what it would come down to.
Yeah, I agree on that aspect.